The hum is deafening. 19,000 vacuum tubes glowing like a city of glass, consuming enough power to dim the lights of a metropolis. Then the general pushes the button, and the world holds its breath for a calculation that never comes. There is only the smell of hot ozone and the terrifying realization that the most expensive brain in history is hollow. It wasn't just a mechanical failure. It was a billion-dollar suicide. How did a 30-ton Titan, built to win a world war, surrender to its own silence? The military built a god with no soul. But history got it wrong. While the colonels stared at the dead switches, the only warning came from the 6 women standing in the shadows, ink-stained fingers versus million-pound blueprints. They were dismissed as clerks while they held the sparks of the future. Why did the powerful system ignore the only tactic that could save them? The answer wasn't in the classified vaults, but in the hands of the underdogs. February 1943. Philadelphia. The air inside the Moore School of Electrical Engineering is a thick, stagnant soup. It smells of ozone, old ink, and the sharp metallic tang of sweat. Outside, the world is quite literally tearing itself apart, and the fuel for that destruction isn't just oil or steel, it is data. The United States Army is drowning in a sea of numbers. Every time a new heavy artillery gun rolls off the assembly line, it is essentially a blind giant. To hit a target 10 miles away, a soldier cannot simply aim and fire. He must account for the thickness of the air, the temperature of the gunpowder, the speed of the wind, and even the very rotation of the earth. Without a firing table, a book of thousands of pre-calculated trajectories, the most advanced weapon in the world, is nothing but a very expensive piece of scrap metal. But there is a crisis in the math. To calculate just one single trajectory by hand takes a human being nearly 40 hours of non-stop agonizing mental labor. It is a marathon of differential equations, a task so grueling that the human mind begins to fray at the edges after only a few pages. The U.S. Army Ordnance Department has a problem. They are producing guns faster than they can produce the math to fire them. For every hour of combat on the front lines, thousands of hours of hand calculations are required back home. The math cannot keep pace with the dying. In the humid, cramped halls of the Moore School, the Army has assembled its secret weapon. They aren't soldiers. They are a battalion of young women recruited from universities across the country. They are officially classified as computers. They sit at long wooden tables, their fingers dancing over mechanical calculators that clack and whir like 1,000 chattering teeth. They work 80-hour weeks, buried under mountains of logarithmic paper. They are the invisible engine of the Allied war machine, yet they are treated with a patronizing, casual dismissal. In the eyes of the military establishment, these women are a stopgap, a necessary nuisance. The system views them as components, not creators. Among them are women like Kay McNulty and Betty Jennings. They are mathematical prodigies, capable of seeing patterns in chaos that would make a seasoned physicist weep. But when they walk down the halls, the officers don't see genius. They see clerical staff. They see girls who should be grateful for the contribution they're allowed to make. One afternoon, a colonel walks through the lab, his boots clicking sharply against the linoleum. He doesn't look at the equations on Kay's desk. He doesn't ask about the errors she's found in the ballistics formulas. He simply checks his watch and asks why the room is so warm. To him, the women are like the light bulbs in the ceiling, useful until they burn out and easily replaced. The establishment decides that the human element is the ultimate failure. They believe the limit of victory is the limit of the female mind. They want something faster, something that doesn't tire, something that doesn't require a lunch break or a salary. They decide to build a god. They call it ENIAC, the electronic numerical integrator and computer. It is a monster, a 30-ton labyrinth of black steel and tangled wire that stretches for 100 feet. It consumes so much power that when it's switched on, the lights in West Philadelphia reportedly dim. It is encrusted with nearly 19,000 vacuum tubes, each one glowing with a faint, ghostly light. The engineers, the fathers of the machine, brag to the press that this titan can calculate a shell's path in 30 seconds. They claim it is a black box of pure victory. The mechanics of the machine are a masterpiece of hardware. It uses electrical pulses to represent numbers, moving them through a series of vacuum tube gates like water rushing through a dam. If a human computer is a bicycle, the ENIAC is a jet engine. But there is a fatal flaw, a blind spot born of pure, unadulterated arrogance. The designers have built a magnificent body, but they have forgotten to give it a soul. The ENIAC has no internal instructions. It cannot think on its own. It is a massive collection of switches and cables with no map. To make it do anything, someone has to physically rewire the entire machine, plugging and unplugging thousands of cables like a frantic telephone operator in a nightmare. The military leadership, however, doesn't care about the software. To them, the word doesn't even exist. They believe that because they have built the hardware, the war is already won. They treat the actual process of making the machine work as a clerical task, something beneath the dignity of the male engineers. The machine is finished, a lead designer declares, looking over the silent, vibrating rows of steel. The rest is just bookkeeping. He treats the silence of the ENIAC as a triumph. He believes the system is so advanced that the people operating it are irrelevant. But he has fatally underestimated the nature of logic. It isn't the steel that wins the war. It is the thought behind it. While the generals toast to their new iron god in the upstairs offices, the machine sits cold and useless in the basement. It doesn't know how to add 1 + 1. It is a 30-ton paperweight. The army has built the fastest calculator in history, and they have no idea how to talk to it. The hammer is about to fall. They have spent millions of dollars and years of labor building a system that is fundamentally broken because they refuse to value the minds that actually understood the math. They believed that the machine would replace the women, but they are about to realize that without those women, the machine is just a very expensive way to fail. The silence in the basement is growing. The orders from the front lines are becoming desperate, and the fathers of computing are standing in front of their creation, staring at a wall of switches, realizing they have no idea what to do next. July 1945. The basement of the University of Pennsylvania is a furnace. Outside, the world is waiting for the thunder of the Manhattan Project. But down here, in the dim light of flickering vacuum tubes, A different kind of history is being written in the dark. The men in charge, the physicists, and the engineers have finished their important work. They have bolted the steel frames together. They have soldered the 19,000 tubes. They have built the body of the Titan. And now they are leaving. To them, the hardware is the masterpiece. The rest, the actual process of making the machine do something, is seen as a menial secondary task, a chore for the clerks. 6 women, Kay, Betty, Marlene, Ruth, Frances, and the other Betty, stand before the ENIAC. They are handed a thick stack of blueprints, thousands of pages of circuit diagrams, resistors, and capacitors. There is no instruction manual. There is no book that explains how to speak to a machine because no one has ever spoken to one before. The lead engineer tosses the schematics onto a table, his eyes already on the door. "Here is how the machine is wired," he says, his voice dripping with a casual, practiced condescension. "Just make it solve the ballistics. It's just a matter of plugging in the cables." He treats the most complex intellectual challenge in human history as if he is asking them to tidy up a linen closet. He believes the genius has already left the room, but as the door closes, the 6 women look at the blueprints, and they see the truth. The engineers have built a masterpiece of electrical flow, but they have no idea how to structure a thought. To program the ENIAC is not to sit at a keyboard. It is a physical act of violence against the machine. They have to crawl inside the steel frame, their hands slick with grease and graphite. The air is 80 degrees, and the vacuum tubes give off a heat so intense it feels like standing next to a dying sun. They are mapping the human mind into electrical pulses. Think of it like a massive, electrified plumbing system. To solve an equation, they must manually route the water, the data through thousands of specific valves and pipes. If a single switch is flipped the wrong way, the logic doesn't just fail, it collides. The machine will choke on its own data, spinning into an infinite loop of nonsense that can burn out hundreds of dollars of vacuum tubes in seconds. The technical reality is brutal. They are using 3,000 switches and 6,000 manual cables to create a program. It is a logic gate puzzle where every piece is made of hot glass and high-voltage copper. While the generals in Washington scream for results, while the casualty lists from the Pacific grow longer by the hour, these 6 women are in the dark, holding the silence that will save the world. They begin to notice things the engineers missed. They realize that the machine doesn't just need to calculate, it needs to remember. The orders from the lead engineers were explicit. Do not touch the master programmer switches. Do not alter the physical logic of the gates. To the men in charge, the women are mere cable pluggers, human extensions of the copper wire. But Kay and Betty know the hardware is a dead end. In the dead of night, they commit an act of intellectual treason. They ignore the standing orders, physically breaching the locked panels of the machine to reroute the signal in a way the designers deemed impossible. If they fail, they are destroying the most expensive military asset in history, a crime punishable by immediate court-martial and imprisonment. They aren't just coding, they are sabotaging the establishment to save it. It is a eureka moment, born of their unique background. Because they spent years as human computers, they know the shortcuts of the human brain. They know how a mathematician skips steps. While the experts see the machine as a giant calculator, The women see it as a mirror of their own thought processes. They are the first to realize that a machine's power is nothing without the invisible art of the algorithm. But the system is watching, and the system is impatient. An army inspector visits the basement, his boots clicking rhythmically against the concrete. He watches Marlene crawling behind a panel, her face smudged with soot, her fingers bleeding from the sharp edges of the steel frame. He doesn't see a pioneer. He sees a technician. "The demonstration is in 3 weeks, the inspector says, his voice cold and fatalistic. "The hardware is perfect. The engineers say the machine is ready. If it fails to calculate the trajectory, it won't be because of the tubes. It will be because the operators weren't up to the task." He scoffs at the mess of cables on the floor. He treats the quiet, intense concentration of the women as a sign of confusion, not brilliance. He believes the machine is the master, and they are its servants, but he has fatally underestimated the ghost in the machine. He treats the ENIAC as a finished tool, a hammer that just needs to be swung. He doesn't realize that the hammer is currently broken into 10,000 pieces, and only these 6 women know how to put it back together. The hammer is about to fall. He believes the demonstration will be a simple victory for the engineers. He has no idea that the perfect hardware he praises is currently a chaotic mess of errors that would take a man a lifetime to solve. He is walking away from a ticking time bomb of logic, leaving the only people who can defuse it standing in the heat, ignored and forgotten. The women don't argue. They don't demand a seat at the table. They simply go back to work. Kay looks at a specific circuit, the master programmer. It is a complex array of switches that controls the timing of the entire 30-ton beast. The engineers said it was impossible to use for multi-step equations. They said the hardware wasn't designed for it. But Kay sees a pattern. She sees a way to loop the signal. It is the birth of the modern computer program. While the fathers of computing are at dinner celebrating their brilliance, Kay is holding a single copper cable, realizing she has just found the key to the future. The air in the basement grows thinner. The heat rises. One by one, the vacuum tubes begin to pop like distant gunfire. For every tube that dies, the logic of the machine shifts. The women have to hunt for the dead tubes by scent, the smell of burning dust and melting solder. They are fighting a war against entropy. Every night they walk home in the dark, their minds still vibrating with the hum of the machine. They are the only ones who know that the ENIAC is alive. They are the only ones who know that the Titan is actually a fragile, temperamental child that they are teaching to speak. The world thinks the hardware is the story. The world thinks the steel is the hero. But the steel is silent, and the time for the great demonstration is running out. The engineers have invited the press. They have invited the military elite. They are preparing to take the stage and claim their glory. They believe they have built a miracle that will change the world forever. But they have forgotten one thing. They have forgotten that they don't know how to turn it on. February 15th, 1946. A cold rain washes over Philadelphia. But inside the University of Pennsylvania, the air is electric with a different kind of storm. This is the day of the great reveal. The press has arrived in their heavy wool coats, carrying flashbulbs and notebooks, eager to witness the electronic Samson that helped win the war. The fathers of computing, the men who design the hardware stand at the front of the room. They are the stars of the show. They speak in grand, sweeping terms about the dawn of a new era. They talk about vacuum tubes, pulse rates, and the end of human error. In the back of the room, standing quietly in the shadows of the very machine they brought to life, are the 6 women. Kay, Betty, Marlene, Ruth, Frances, and the other Betty. They are the ones who spent the last 6 months crawling through the guts of the ENIAC. They are the ones who translated the abstract physics of a flying shell into a physical map of cables and switches. They are the only people in the room who actually know how to make the Titan speak. The lights dim. A silence falls over the crowd, broken only by the low, predatory hum of the cooling fans. A high-ranking general hands a stack of cards to one of the engineers. It is a complex ballistics problem, a calculation that would take a human mathematician weeks of agonizing labor. The engineer feeds the data into the machine. The input, a series of electrical pulses representing the weight of the shell and the angle of the gun. The black box. The ENIAC's 19,000 tubes begin to fire, a frantic dance of electrons jumping across vacuum gaps at the speed of light. The machine doesn't calculate in the way we do. It is a physical river of electricity being diverted through gates and resistors, following the invisible logic path the women have burned into its circuits. The output, 20 seconds. The machine stops. The answer is printed. It has calculated the path of the shell faster than the shell itself can travel through the air. The machine stops. The final digit clacks into place. But there is no applause. There is only a sudden, suffocating silence, the kind that follows a public execution. The generals stare at the printed sheet, then at the glowing Titan, then at their own watches. They realize with a cold sinking in their chests that they have just witnessed a power they cannot control and a logic they do not understand. The fathers of computing stand frozen, their faces ashen, looking like frauds caught in a spotlight. They don't cheer. They simply avert their eyes from the women in the back of the room, ashamed that the miracle they claimed as their own was actually performed by the help. But the cameras miss the irony. A reporter from a major newspaper pushes past Betty Jennings. He doesn't ask her name. He doesn't ask how she managed to bridge the gap between the physics and the wires. He simply asks her to step aside so he can get a better shot of the real inventors. In that moment, a specific interaction unfolds a micro scene that will define the next 50 years of history. An army officer walks up to Ruth and Marlene. He looks at their smudged dresses and their tired eyes. "Good job today, girls," he says, his voice dripping with a patronizing warmth. "You made the machine look very good. Now why don't you head home? The engineers have a lot of interviews to do, and we need to clear the floor for the professional photos." They are dismissed from their own victory. They are treated as hostesses at a party they spent their lives preparing. The next morning, the headlines across the country hail the woody electronic brain and the men who gave it life. The 6 women appear in the photographs, standing next to the towering racks of steel, their hands on the switches. But the captions don't mention their names. They are referred to as refrigerator models, pretty faces added to the frame to make the terrifying machine look more approachable to the public. The system has made its decision. The intellectual labor of the algorithm, the very foundation of the digital age, is rebranded as clerical work. Since it was done by women, the establishment decides it must be easy. It must be menial. It must be forgettable. The men receive the medals. They receive the tenure. They receive the contracts that will build the multi-billion-dollar computer industry. The women go back to the basement. This is the bitter victory. They saved the world from a sea of data. They invented the very concept of software, and in return, history edited them out of the script. But time has a way of haunting the present. For 50 years, the story of the ENIAC was told as a story of hardware. It was a story of tubes and transistors, of men and machines. The women were seen as footnotes, if they were seen at all. It wasn't until the late 1990s that historians began to look at the wiring diagrams again. They began to ask, who actually told the machine what to do? They found the names. They found the genius. History isn't a record of what happened. It's a ledger of what the powerful chose to keep. The military didn't forget the names of these 6 women. They deleted them. It was a bureaucratic execution, a way to ensure the billion-dollar checks kept flowing to the right people. We see the same shadow play today in every boardroom where a visionary sells an algorithm built on the backs of 10,000 invisible, low-wage minds. The ENIAC isn't a relic of the past. It's the blueprint for the modern ghost labor economy. We are still building titans, and we are still pretending the souls inside them don't exist. The machine is humming, and it still doesn't care if you remember who gave it a voice. It is a loss of our own understanding of where our world truly came from. The digital age wasn't born in a boardroom or a high-end lab. It was born in a hot, humid basement in Philadelphia, crafted by 6 women who were told they were just clerks. The fathers of computing built the body, but it was the mothers who gave it a mind. If you believe that stories like Kay's and Betty's deserve to be remembered, join our ranks by subscribing. We have synthesized this narrative from reputable historical archives and verified sources. However, the fog of war often extends to the history books. If you spot any inaccuracies or have additional details to share, please correct us in the comments. We strive for the absolute truth, and your knowledge helps us get there. Thank you for keeping history alive.